Good morning. Welcome to St. Paul's Universalist Church. I want to give special credit to Mark for managing to get our organ, which seems to have developed a mind of its own, to perform for us. In the way of announcements, I have one from our friend David. The Meatloaf Dinner sign up. Meatloaf Dinner is November 6th. But it's time to start gathering stuff for it. There's a sign-up sheet in the back if you'd like to donate. Please consider a cash donation for small stuff and a special note that if you want to provide brownies, they must be thick. I was curious as to what that meant. If you would like to know what that means, I would suggest after the service talking to David or Pat. Because you want to make thick brownies.
We use 2 packages instead of 1 in a 13 by 9 pan.
Right. Same size pan, but double the mixes. Gotcha. On the back table, I'll take a snapshot of it today, which I meant to do a couple Sundays ago. It was brought to my attention that people missed. I used to do like a mostly weekly email out to people that wanted to know things that were coming up. So I need to recreate that list. So if you want to be part of that, on the back table there's a sheet, and just put your name and your email address, and I will include you on it. And if at any point you decide, I don't need that much extra email, I can take you off. It's not like a lifelong commitment. Are there any other announcements that anyone wishes to share with the congregation? All right, let us proceed to our call to worship. He said the real reason that we can't have the 10 Commandments in a courthouse is that you cannot post, "Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, and thou shalt not lie," in a building full of lawyers, judges, and politicians. It creates a hostile work environment. Today I'll be talking about the commandments. Are there 10? Are there 20? Are there 2? And our music, as you may have already figured out, will reflect the occasion of the Jewish High Holy Days, which is the period in which we are in. And so I welcome you to our Sunday service. Here we have the opportunity to come together on our shared spiritual journeys. We come from different backgrounds, and we look at life from different perspectives. Yet we know that here in this place, that all of us are welcome just as we are. And as is our tradition, please join me in the words as I light the chalice. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage. Our opening song is number 215.
Deep written on the
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another and with our God. We are now at the time of the service where we share joys, sorrows, and concerns. Any joys, sorrows, or concerns?
Well, I have various ones. On September 12th, my grandson Ben and his wife now, Stacy, got married. Unfortunately, her mother is now in hospice. And last week, on the 16th, Jeff performed a beautiful ceremony for Nolan and Sarah. I couldn't even remember her name. And this one is for Steve's father. He turned 90, and they're having a surprise party for him today in Dowston.
Just a side note.
I had another one too. My daughter from California came and she stayed a week with us.
Oh, Jennifer came from California. I got to meet her in person.
From California.
From
California. She
right.
stayed a week with us.
Yes. And Pat cuts a mean rug on the dance floor, I got to tell you that much. And I'm not making that up.
I had fun.
Any others? Slow week. Kind of dreary. I don't know. Seems like it's been wet and pollen, of course, because they have allergies. And the other day I saw the pollen was high, and so I kept moving the map, wider and wider. And it turns out that there's a little spot of Oregon and a little part of the coast of Nova Scotia that does not have moderate to high pollen levels across the entire area. So there's no place safe for me in North America unless I want to hop a plane to Oregon. Anyway, that was a side note. This is a candle for any joys, sorrows, or concerns that go unspoken but remain in our hearts and minds. And we will now give and receive the morning offering to support the work, the wonder, and the witness of this community.
No, I know.
Rejoice in love we know and share, in love and beauty everywhere. Rejoice in truth that sets us free, and in the good that yet shall be.
I have two readings today for our meditation. First is from the Old Testament book of Exodus, 19th chapter. Came to pass on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunderclaps and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud was upon the mountain, and a very powerful blast of a shofar, or ram's horn. And the entire nation that was in the camp shuddered. Moses brought the people out toward God from the camp, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. And the entire Mount Sinai smoked, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. And its smoke ascended like the smoke of the kiln, and the entire mountain quaked violently. The sound of the shofar grew increasingly stronger. Moses would speak, and God would answer him with a voice. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents, to the third and the fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord had made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. My second reading is from the New Testament, Gospel according to Matthew, the 22nd chapter, beginning with verse 34. To give you a bit of context, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the Jewish religious authorities and experts. The Bible often portrays them as being so focused on the letter of the law that they lose sight of the spirit of the law. And because of this, they often clashed with the prophet Jesus. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Let us now share a moment of silence where we listen to the wisdom of our hearts and minds. Our next song is number 218. When I mention the term, the Ten Commandments, you may find yourselves conjuring up pictures of 2 stone tablets, or perhaps a memory of Charlton Heston, decked out as Moses from his famous role in that 1956 movie. The Ten Commandments are often seen as one of the underpinnings of our modern-day laws and moral codes. According to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the commandments were given directly by God to the prophet Moses, and as such, they hold a special place in Western society. The Ten Commandments often appear in Christian churches, of course. If you direct your attention 1, 2, 3, the very top stained glass, you will see the Ten Commandments. They also adorn many courtrooms in this country. Such displays have become something of a recent battlefield in the ongoing culture wars, with some arguing that the commandments represent their historical influence over our system of laws, while others would say that such displays violate the separation of church and state. A recent survey conducted by the American Bible Society found that the average American household owns between 4 and 5 copies of the Bible. It is far and away the best-selling book of all time. Over a quarter of the people surveyed said that they read their Bible daily at least several times a week. That being said, over 60% of the people surveyed could not name more than 5 of the 10 commandments. It would seem that displaying the commandments sometimes is more important than knowing or practicing them. Despite the fact that most people can't name more than half of them without looking, they continue to hold a place of high esteem in our culture. We can think of other great influences on our laws. The Code of Hammurabi and the Magna Carta come to mind. But unlike those sources, the Ten Commandments are said to have come directly from God. The Bible says in one account that they were written on 2 stone tablets by the finger of God. It doesn't get more direct than that. And yet the 10 Commandments present us with several challenges that I would like to explore. For one thing, it depends on which set of 10 Commandments we're talking about. Because the scriptures actually record at least 2 different versions of those commandments in Exodus. According to that book, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai where God appears in clouds of fire. And he enters the cloud, and he stays there for 40 days. His people, the Israelites, the same people who had been delivered out of slavery and had witnessed God perform numerous miracles on their behalf, parting the Red Sea, all the plagues, all that stuff. And like a parent that, wants you to know that they've done good things for you, if you read those parts of the Old Testament, God pretty frequently reminds them, remember that thing about slavery? Who delivered you? I delivered you. Don't forget that. But anyway, knowing all that, they quickly lose faith, figure Moses isn't coming back. They proceed to melt down their jewelry, and they fashion the golden calf, which they set upon an altar and start worshiping. God picks up on this, gets very angry, and lets Moses know about it. It's basically like, I'm done with these people. We're going to take you, start over, and I'm just going to smite them all. And Moses is like, hold on. Let me intercede. So he comes down the mountain with the tablets, sees how quickly his people have forgotten him and God, and in a fit of rage, throws the tablets down on the altar, destroying the golden calf. And then he has it ground up, and he makes the people drink it in water, mixed with water. After Moses has cooled off, he once again goes to speak with God, and this time God tells him to have 2 stone tablets made and tells him what to carve into them. But it appears that the Almighty has decided to revise the commandments. The original commandments are the ones that I read earlier. That was from Exodus 20. In Exodus 34, we find the following. You shall not make cast idols. You shall keep the festival of unleavened bread. what we today call Passover. The firstborn of your livestock belongs to God. Observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. They kept that one. Observe the festival of weeks, the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the festival of ingathering at the turn of the year. All males are required to appear before God 3 times each year. Don't mix sacrificial blood with leavened bread. Don't leave the Passover feast sacrifice out until morning. The best fruits of your trees are to be offered to God. And you shall not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk when you're cooking it. The second set of commandments isn't exactly something that you'd necessarily want on the walls of your courthouse. And the problem then becomes, which version of the 10 Commandments are we supposed to follow? Okay, and people will say, well, of course, the first ones, because that second set wouldn't make a lot of sense today. But consider, there are 2 versions of the creation story. In one, Adam and Eve are created together. But we, in our society, and to our detriment, especially as far as women have been treated, we go with the one where Adam came first and Eve was kind of secondary. But they're both there. We just choose to follow one instead of the other. And even if we ignore that second set, there's still problems. For example, you shall have no other gods before me. Which gods are we talking about? It would seem the God of the Jewish people, and that's presumably the same God the Christian scriptures. Are we talking Old Testament God, the one who says that he's a jealous God who will punish those who offend him for 4 generations? Or the cooler, more loving New Testament God, who is a whole lot more loving and forgiving? And is it okay to worship other gods as long as God takes priority over them? And what about you shall not make idols? On the surface, that seems pretty straightforward, as demonstrated by what happened with the golden calf. But God goes further and says not to make a carved image of anything that appears in the sky, on the earth, or under the sea. Is God offended by artists who make a sculpture, or a painting, or draw a picture? It seems silly now, but the church went back and forth historically for centuries over that very issue. It's part of the reason that Protestant churches are generally less ornate than Catholic ones. It's also the reason that Amish dolls have no faces. Next, there's, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So you're walking barefoot through your house, and you stub your pinky toe on a chair leg. There's that 2-second delay, and then, God darn it! Except you probably say something a little stronger than darn, because that hurts. Have you taken the Lord's name in vain? Most biblical scholars think that the 3rd commandment has a lot less to do with swearing and a lot more to do with breaking an oath. So in other words, if you swear to tell the truth, so help you God in court, and you lie, that is more akin to the spirit of taking the Lord's name in vain. You basically took an oath in God's name and you broke it. And what about the commandment to keep the Sabbath holy? That seems straightforward, but the question becomes, which day are we talking about? Because while Judaism, Christianity, and Islam can all trace their roots back to the prophet Abraham, they all observe the Sabbath on different days. For Jews, it lasts from Friday night to Saturday night. For Christians, it's Sunday. For Muslims, the Sabbath is on Friday. And when God says to rest, God means it. You, your family, your farm animals, even your slaves, they all have to rest on the Sabbath. And speaking of slaves, does that mean that God condones slavery? The southern states of this country certainly used that argument for decades. Honor your father and your mother. This is all well and good if you have caring, loving parents. It makes sense. If you are a parent, of course, you want to be honored. But what if your parents are neglectful or abusive? Having worked nearly 30 years in public education, I have met my fair share of dishonorable parents. Then we have you shall not murder. And it is murder, not kill. That's how it literally translates. You shall not murder. The Old Testament has extensive cases of situations where God says that it's okay to kill someone. So what is the difference between murdering someone and killing them? That's a can of worms. Is war murder? Is capital punishment? Is self-defense? Some would say yes. Some would say no. The seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery. In the time of Moses, unlike today, adultery was only said to have occurred when a man had an affair with an engaged or married woman. Oddly enough, an illicit affair between a married man and an unmarried, not engaged woman was frowned upon, but not considered to be as great a sin. In modern terms, a recent survey found that 90% of Americans surveyed believed that adultery was morally wrong, but only 60% of those same people felt that it should be treated as a crime. In the time of Moses, getting caught committing adultery could get you stoned to death. Usually the woman, sometimes the man. Next we have you shall not steal. That seems straightforward enough. If something doesn't belong to you, don't take it. But again, things can become muddled. If someone who is starving steals a loaf of bread, does God see it the same as someone who sees a $50 bill on the counter of a store and just decides, hey, I could use 50 bucks? Is taxation stealing? Sure feels like it sometimes. When the government gives oil subsidies to companies when oil is making record profits, is that stealing? So again, it's a slippery slope. The ninth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This seems to apply, at least in the time of Moses, to giving false testimony against your fellow Israelite in legal disputes. However, it's also been interpreted as you shall not lie. That's more black and white. Truth is generally a good thing. We like people to be truthful. Even so, there are circumstances where lying may not be a bad thing. Just as an example, the people who hid slaves for the Underground Railroad, or who hid Jewish people from Nazi persecution. Obviously, they had to lie if people came knocking on the door. Hey, are you keeping people? No, I am not. That was lying. Does God still consider that wrong? And finally, the 10th commandment, you shall not covet. And I am of the opinion that this is the most broken of the commandments in our modern society. Just think about it. Every day, in magazines, on the radio, on televisions, on the internet, we are bombarded with ads and images that blatantly encourage us to want what we don't have. Wear this or eat that, and you'll look just like this or that celebrity. Drink this beer, drive that car, you'll be living the good life. You know you want to. It seems that our entire consumer culture actively seeks to make us covet those things and experiences that we don't have. My point so far is not to mock the 10 Commandments. It is to point out that while on the surface they seem pretty black and white, they don't leave a lot of room for nuance and exceptions. And as I think I've shown, there are exceptions to every one of those rules. So also important to look at the Ten Commandments in context. And it's easier to look at that second set in context than the first set, but I'm talking about the first set because those are the ones most of us think about. Those commandments were presented to the tribal, nomadic Jewish people of approximately 3,000 years ago. Taking the commandments out of context is spiritually and politically dangerous. To hold up those 10 commandments, and in the Hebrew language, they aren't even called commandments, they're called terms. But to hold up the 10 terms of the moral law without reference to the larger intent of the words leads to all sorts of abuses and misinterpretations. I have seen several politicians as well as known several acquaintances who will argue how much better society would be if we just, forget all the rest, just follow the 10 Commandments. But in my opinion, they're not thinking that through. Imagine if we use the 10 Commandments today as our primary system of laws. No shopping, no dining out, no sporting events, no catching up on yard work on Sundays. No artwork, no photography. And imagine how the economy would be impacted if we couldn't encourage people to covet things. And those are just a few examples. I recently came across these words written by the American poet and author Katha Pollitt. And I'm inclined to agree with her. See what you think. She said, when you consider that God could have commanded anything he wanted, anything, the 10 Commandments have got to rank as one of the great missed moral opportunities of all time. How different history would have been had he clearly and unmistakably forbidden war, tyranny, taking over other people's countries, slavery, exploitation of workers, cruelty to children, wife-beating, stoning, treating women, or anyone for that matter, as chattel or inferior beings. So if the 10 Commandments leave a lot of room for interpretation, what then can we go by in the way of a foundation for rules? Well, that's why I included my second reading from Matthew's Gospel. Centuries after the time of Moses, when Jesus was asked which of the commandments was the most important, he replied, "Love God and love your neighbor as yourself," emphasizing that on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. That's the linchpin. That's the hub. That's the foundation. Now that is not only worthy of hanging on a courthouse wall, it's easier to remember because there's only two. Those two great commandments are the summary, the intended wisdom behind the 10 Commandments. The 10 terms of the law should be the foundation for living a good life, and that foundation, at least as presented in the Gospel of Matthew, is love. When it comes right down to it, we really only need those two commandments. Here's my reasoning. Because if we are truly honoring God and truly loving our neighbors, then we're not going to murder or steal or lie or break vows or envy or put others down. From a universalist perspective, that should be the first question of morality. Are my actions loving? And if we are truly able to come from a place of love, and I'm not standing up here and saying that's easy. It is not easy. It is not easy at all. It's something that requires a lot of work. But if we strive to do that, if we make that our aim, we don't have to be perfect at it. If we make that our goal, then the morality of our actions, whether they are grounded in the 10 Commandments or not, will come naturally. Something to think about. Amen. Our closing song is number 219. Close our service with the words of David Josiah Brewer, who said, "The better life rests less on the prohibitions of the Ten Commandments and more on the parable of the Good Samaritan and the Golden Rule." Please join me in the words as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across